For regular videos on ancient cultures and forgotten civilizations, please subscribe. And for additional information, see the notes below the video. Welcome to the Antiquities Travel Guide. Follow us to different countries as we search for ancient artifacts. If you too wish to explore the ancient past through travel, we'll help you plan where to go, what to see, and how best to enjoy what you encounter. In this series of the ATG, you can accompany Cassie and me on our trek through the Yucatan Peninsula, homeland of the ancient Maya. Come on, let's go! In our previous two episodes, Cassie and I visited ancient cities of the Pulque region in Yucatan, Mexico, which flourished during the Terminal Classic period. In this one, we investigate cities that reached their peak splendor earlier. We had breakfast at the Pickled Onion, where we had stayed the night. It was included, by the way, and very tasty. We then hopped into our vehicle and headed south into the state of Campeche. We just had a lovely breakfast at the Pickled Onion, and I got to talk to the owner, Valerie Pickles. She was very interested in the Mayan ruins as well, and she gave me a book. It's a photocopied book, but she gave me a free book on all the Mayan archaeological sites. It was really cool. Anyway, we are now on our way southward to go to Santa Rosa Xtampak, another cool site, and then after that to EDZNA. So I'm looking forward to sharing them with you. Santa Rosa Xtampak, or just Xtampak for short, is considered the largest and most important pre-Columbian Mayan city in the Chenes region. To get there, we had to veer off the paved highway onto a dirt road. If you're traveling here by car, there's no avoiding that. It's about a 45-minute drive on the dirt road, but compared to some of the roads we traveled later in our trip, this one was a piece of cake. The road becomes paved again closer to the site. As there are no rivers and no cenotes in this area, the Mayans had to build chenes, or cisterns, in the ground to capture the rainwater, and that is why we call it the Chenes region. And, as with Pulque, there's an architectural style associated with this region, which I will show you in a minute. Xtampak was built on a natural elevation, so we had to hike uphill a bit to get there. The inhabitants leveled the ground, so at least it was flat when we got to the top. You can see the whole site in about 60 to 90 minutes. Cost, 45 pesos, which is about $2.40 American. Nowhere to eat here, but there is a vending machine.
Xtampac, which means old walls, is the only walled city in Mexico, and one of very few in all of America. Because of its important historical heritage, it was named Cultural Patrimony of Humanity by UNESCO in 1999.
While Uxmal, Cabá, and Sayil flourished during the Terminal Classic period, Xtampak was already in decline by that time. Its heyday was in the late Classic, between 600 and 800 CE, during which time it was a regional capital having a population of around 10 to 12,000 people, though for much of that time it was under the authority of Calakmul, a much larger city that we'll be visiting in a couple of days. This is one of the few Chenes sites with stelae. 8 stelae and 3 capstones from Xtampak give us dates ranging between 646 and 948 CE. But ceramic evidences begin in the 3rd century BCE, indicating habitation that far back, long before the monumental architecture was constructed. We are standing here at a building called the Mouth of the Serpent, and it's called that because you can see around this small room here a serpent's mouth. You notice the 2 eyes above, and you got the jaw, and you're basically walking through the jaw of the serpent. Now, who does the serpent represent? It's some kind of a mountain deity or sky deity. We're not exactly sure. Some people identify it with Chak, the rain god. Some people say it's Amna, the creator. But whatever the case, when you entered into that mouth, you're entering into the spiritual realm. So the room obviously had some kind of religious significance. And having a mask framing a doorway is typical of the Chenes architectural style. The heart of the city consists of a series of interconnected squares and courtyards. Its closed and compact organization makes it more similar to the Pulque-style cities, like we saw yesterday, rather than the other Chenes cities. but considering its proximity to the Pulg region, that's not at all surprising. You'll find at the quarter buildings on all four sides of it, and you can access it on broad flights of stairs. This building here in the El Cuartel is a good example of the Chenes architectural style. So how do you identify it? Well, usually you'll find a one-story building, that's typical of Chenes, with a very short foundation, okay? There's usually two parts, an upper and lower facade to the building. Mosaics usually decorate both parts. This is a typical example of a Chenes mosaic. You see a spiral pattern, you'll often see those on it. You'll see faces of distorted beings. That's also typical. What you will not find in Chenes is glyphs. They don't appear, and you won't find like actual pillars, although you might have fake pillars or something like that. But the most fabulous structure at Xtampak is the palace. It's about 50 feet tall, and unlike many of the larger Maya buildings, like for example the North Palace we just saw at Sayil, they were built in stages over time. This one appears to have been built all at once. It was planned as a multi-story structure from the beginning, and then it was made. It's got 3 floors, 27 rooms on the first floor, 12 on the second, 5 on the third. That makes 44 total rooms. And it has 23 different stairways on it. The third, the highest level, we think it represents the ceremonial portion of the building. It can only be reached by means of the interior stairways on the west side of the building or the monumental stairway on the east side. We think that that stairway is where these formal processions probably took place to go up into the sacred precinct. We don't think that everyone was allowed up those stairs. The religious practitioners went up the stairs in a procession. The general populace probably watched from the plaza below. But the rooms on the second floor are even more difficult to reach. Only through the interior stair system can you get there. Now, it doesn't tell us what the functions of the rooms are, but the restricted access probably means that only special people were allowed to go there. This is for the highest ranking members of the ruling class here at Xtampak. That was pretty cool. Xtampak. Oh, it could be my number 2 at this point. I mean, obviously Uxmal is the best, but that palace there, pretty impressive. And although I love the Kodspop at Kaba, that building was maybe just a little bit better. After Xtampak, we made our way towards EDZNA. We were ready for something to eat, and since there's no food sold at Xtampak, and we were in a very rural area, the nearest place to go is Hopelchen town. It's on the way. You can get gas there too if you need it. We stopped at a little place called La Michoacana, a common name here for ice cream parlors. If you're interested in how that name came to apply to ice cream shops, I'll leave a link in the video description of some research done on that subject. After that, things took a turn for the worse, because we got lost. Word of warning, your GPS can sometimes lead you astray. It turns out we could have stayed on the main road, but my GPS gave me what purported to be a shorter route, and it turned out we wasted 3 hours in the middle of nowhere. So we didn't make EDZNA that day. We decided to go to our hotel and explore EDZNA in the morning. We stayed in a very small town called Guayamon at the Hotel Los Cedros. For supper, we went to a nearby luxury hotel, the Hacienda Guayamon. Didn't stay there, a little outside of our budget, but their restaurant was excellent and affordable. It sits within the ruins of a large hacienda built in 1700. We strolled through it after our meal, enjoying the beauty of the grounds, and it was a lovely evening. In the morning, we had a quick and modest breakfast at our hotel, and then headed off to the EDZNA Mayan ruins, which is a beautiful archaeological site in northern Campeche. The archaeological site is open every day from 8 to 5, like most of the sites we visited.
About 9 a.m., nice and cool out here. We just left the ticketing office. Tickets were 60 pesos each. There were some cute little kitties sunbathing. There's a bathroom facility. No food, though. Ah, here it is.
Oh my gosh, here it is! EDZNA! Come on!
EDZNA is the southernmost of the Públic cities and one of the most important Mayan sites in Campeche. The Maya occupied this area from about 600 BCE until 1000 CE.
The word EDZNA has been interpreted to mean House of the Itza. The Itza were a group of Mayans native to southeastern Campeche, and we'll be talking more about them when we get to our Chichen Itza episode. For the Maya of this area, EDZNA was the earliest major ceremonial center in what has to have been the most favored geographic setting in all of the Yucatan, on the edge of the largest aguada in the entire peninsula. This huge depression, full of soil, provided the agricultural support for the city. You enter the site through the plaza called the Courtyard of the Ambassadors. That's a modern name given to it because international crews help restore the site. Anyway, this plaza consists of several different structures, most of them on low-rise platforms.
We're definitely going to need bug spray.
Ah, good idea.
You'll also see a choltun here, which is a well or a cistern to contain water. This city had elaborate underground systems to capture the rainwater. A whole web of hydraulic channels. It's estimated that canals radiated out in all directions from the city center, and they were used to water the valley or to transport goods and people to and from the city center, but also to provide a habitat for birds and fish and mollusks and other food animals. You can see the remains of a corbelled vault on one of the structures. It opens up on both sides and you can walk through it. EDZNA was positioned at a crossroads of trade, and so unsurprisingly, although it's a Públic site and many of its buildings are in the Públic style, other styles are evident here too. EDZNA was first settled between 600 and 400 BCE. Masonry structures in the Petén style began to appear between 350 BCE and 250 CE. EDZNA then developed into a major city. Like Xtampac, it reached its period of splendor in the late Classic period between 600 and 900 CE. At that time, the city grew to about 25,000 inhabitants. The Públic and Chenes-style architecture appeared around then, while EDZNA was exerting its political and economic influence to become a regional capital. Passing the choltun, you'll arrive at the main plaza. Commanding the entire west side of the plaza is the Nahochna, means big house. It's a long structure with these graded levels. It's almost 400 feet long, and running across the top of the platform are two continuous hallways. There's about 24 entryways on it, but there's not much of the upper floor that's still preserved. This structure probably had a civic or administrative function. Two small sakbeob, and if you're wondering, sakbeob is the plural for sakbe, these white ceremonial roads, led across the Grand Plaza from either end of the Nahochna, and they converge on a very large structure that forms the whole east end of the plaza. It's got a broad stairway that leads up to the great Acropolis, which is the most eye-popping section of the city ruins. The great Acropolis is built on this massive platform. It's 19 feet high and measures over 400 feet long. The most outstanding structure in the Acropolis is the building of the 5 levels, as they call it. On the far side, that's the east side, this building is 110 feet high. Unfortunately, you're not allowed to go up it. I've seen photos of people climbing to the top, but when we were there, it was closed off. But it's got this towering roof comb, it's got all kinds of vaulted rooms. The first 4 levels are believed to have been living quarters for Mayan priests. On the 5th level, they found the remains of a shrine and an altar. There are 22 total rooms in the temple, plus 5 rooms in the building at the very top. Now this structure was not built all in one go, because they found the remains of an early classic pyramid underneath all of this. At the base of the central stairway are 4 risers that contain 86 glyph blocks forming a hieroglyphic stairway. Now most of these glyph blocks were found buried in the rubble, and they've been reconstructed by archaeologists, but there is a recovered date of 652 CE. But how did the Mayans record their dates? Maya dates are written in glyphs, of course. They're usually presented as a series of 5 numbers, written vertically. But for ease, scholars will transliterate these dates into our own system by listing a date as a series of 5 numbers separated by dots. What do the numbers mean? The number on the right represents the day of the month, or kin, as the Maya called it. There were 20 days in a Mayan month, so the numbers go from 0 to 19. The next number to the left of that is what month it is. The word is Huinaw in Mayan.
There were 18 months in a Mayan year, so these numbers go from 0 to 17. The next number to the left of that is the year, which they call tun. They counted the years in scores, groupings of 20 years, so the numbers run from 0 to 19. The next number to the left then is the score, or katun. In which score did this event take place? These numbers also run from 0 to 19, because scores were also grouped into 20s. Finally, we have the era, or baktun. One baktun equals 20 katuns, which means that a baktun was equal to 400 years. And yes, these numbers also run from 0 to 19. So actually all the numbers run from 0 to 19, except for the month, which runs from 0 to 17. So, earlier, when I referred to a date of 652 CE being found on the stairway of the Building of 5 Levels, it was written actually as 911-000. That means that 9 eras have passed, 11 scores, and 0 years, months, and days. Since we have confidently been able to anchor the Mayan calendar to our own calendar, we then can know that this refers to October 9th, 652. There's a date converter on the internet that's super easy to use. If you want to play around with it, I'll leave a link below. The stairway appears to record the accession to power of King Xtampac, just a couple of years before the recorded date. A political patronage statement is made on the stairway, which indicates that Xtampac was a vassal to a more powerful overlord. And right now we think the most likely identity of that overlord is the King of Calakmul. In the center of the courtyard is the solar platform, as it's called. It's thought to have been used for astronomical and other ritual purposes. Across the plaza to the north is the North Temple, which incorporates a mixture of architectural styles.
What are your first impressions?
This is an unbelievable view. You can just get an idea of the magnitude of this city. I mean, this is just the main square. You know, there's another one over there. This was a gigantic place.
Yeah. I just want to know what their legs look like, going up these huge stairs all day.
Yeah, they had good glutes, I'm sure. One of the great things about EDZNA is that it's a fairly large site with a great deal of standing architecture, but it isn't often crowded. The other structures in the Great Plaza include the House of the Moon and the Southwest Temple. Access to those buildings was limited to the king or to the priests. The Temple of the Moon is a truncated pyramid. It's got 6 tiers with a broad staircase. Going back out into the Great Plaza, you can see on the south side there's a ball court and another temple called the South Temple, which is a 5-tiered pyramid with a Puuk-style temple on the top. This is from the late Classic period. Now located behind the ball court, further south and outside of the Grand Plaza, is the Temple of the Masks. So here we are at the Temple of the Masks, and at the bottom of the temple, it's a multi-tiered temple, but at the bottom of the temple, you can see where the temple gets its name. We have these amazing, exquisitely carved masks of the sun god, Kinich Aha. And look at the work on that. Now this represents the god at sunset, and the one down there at the other end represents him at sunrise, the two different parts of the sun god's life. Near the Temple of the Masks is the small Acropolis, which is on another raised platform. This is the oldest complex at the site. Some of the most ancient findings from EDZNA come from here. Ceramics date to around 400 to 250 BCE. There were many stelae found here that dated between the 1st and 5th centuries CE, but they're not here anymore because they've been relocated so that they can be protected and preserved. Leading out to the northwest from the Great Plaza is a sock bay. It's about half a mile, and it goes to a small plaza containing several structures known as the Old Sorceress Group. This group dates to the pre-Classic period. The main structure there is the Temple of the Witch. The years between 695 and 735 witnessed a steep decline in the power of the great city of Calakmul, which, as you know, was probably ruling over EDZNA. So EDZNA and many of the other sites that were under Calakmul's shadow found themselves free, but also pretty vulnerable. In 790, a new dynasty of foreign origin took over ruling the city. And when I say foreign, I just mean from elsewhere in Mesoamerica. And this dynasty took over right around the same time that the Shu family began ruling in Uxmal. EDZNA was finally abandoned in 1450. After EDZNA, we drove southward deep into the heart of the peninsula. What did we find there? I'll tell you next episode. If you want to see the fascinating lost cities of Campeche, don't forget to subscribe and ding the bell to be notified when the episode is released. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.